Well, I was planing these 16 boards of white oak on my industrial grade planer made in Taiwan, and guess what happened? It broke. So these two shafts are for the feed rollers, and this gearbox transmits the power coming from the blade rotating, and it slows it down so that it can drive the feed rollers. Now, let me show you what happened. Here's the gearbox gear train mechanism. This rod, you push it in and out to engage and disengage the gears, and it doesn't engage very far with the pinion, and I must not have had it in all the way because I've really worn down the teeth right on the edge. So my guess is what happened is I thought I was fully engaged, but indeed I wasn't, and it was just on the edge of these teeth, and as soon as it hit some resistance, it sheared off all those pinion teeth, and now my gear train is severely compromised. So I got another clue as to why this gearbox might have stripped out. This is where the gearbox is. This is the cutter head that starts turning the gearbox. This is the rear feed roll, which I can turn with my hand. So you know, it's a little stiff, but it's not bad. This one I cannot turn with my hand. And so then I tried to put the sprocket on it, and I still can't turn it with the sprocket on there. So then I tried putting a pipe wrench on the sprocket, and you can see oh, there it goes. So that's turning pretty hard. There must be some sort of a jam in the bearings or something, so I'm going to take it apart and check it out. Well, these feed rolls weren't too hard to get out. This little bracket here kind of rotates over, and then the whole feed roll just drops out. And now that I have the feed roll, I can see that on this side, this block rotates freely. The spring goes, kind of insets in a hole there. This side, block doesn't turn at all. So I can take this one out, I can lubricate that, no problem. This other side, I might have to hammer this or use a gear puller to get it off. But there's probably just debris in here. Well, guess what? After I shine that up on the inside with my wire brush, it's even more obvious than other. It's like there's threads cut in there. This bearing is ridiculous. There's just no way I can save this bearing. And same thing down here on the shaft. This shaft is so beat up, and I can see that there's areas that have gouged and they've kind of created like a raised spot. So if I take my good bearing from the other side, I cannot even slip it on here very far. It goes up to here, and that's it. So I'm gonna have to think of another solution to fix this. Now, even though the shaft was beat up, I did manage to save it by going around with my file and taking the high spots off. And I got it to the point now where I can actually get the good bearing from the other end to slip on and rotate freely. So I think I've saved this shaft. I just got to order another one of these blocks, and that's good news because these blocks are only about a $3 part. They're real cheap. This was actually about 80 bucks to get a whole new roller. So I'm going to be able to save it. And the smoother this is, the better, so I'm just going to take sandpaper and try to get those file marks out a little bit. Well, I did an online search and I couldn't find a CP Tools wood planer, so I got looking at pictures, and it seems like Steelex, Steel City, and Delta and Powermatic all at one time sold this planer under their brand. So I was able, this is from the Powermatic planer, and if I put it on, fits just fine. A little oil and that'll be perfect. And here was my mistake last time. I'm just going to put a little oil in each of these top holes, and then just wiggle it back and forth. Kind of like a rolling pin, huh? What kind of cookies that would make. Now I'm going to turn my attention to the gearbox, and I'm going to start by cleaning up those mangled teeth. And here that part is all cleaned up all the way around. I've got all the burrs off the teeth, so that shouldn't be a problem anymore. Now I just got to wash this thing before I put it back together. So my issue is that I'm not getting enough gear engagement. Since I ground off some of these teeth, it's not enough engagement to my satisfaction. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to flip this gear around. So now, this is helical gearing, but since the angle of the gear still goes the same way whether you flip it or not, I'm actually allowed to flip this gear. and you can see it runs just fine. And now I can get this in a lot closer. The driving of the helical gearing is going to make this gear want to tend to push in that way. So all I need to do is pin this one in place where I like it, which is right about here with, you know, maybe 0.5 millimeter gap between these two gears. Okay, I've got just a piece of paper in here for a spacer between these two gears, and now I'm going to drill through. Now I'm going to pin this gear to the shaft with a roll pin. That way it can't slide back and forth anymore. Pretty happy with it. This gear is never going to come out of gear. Hopefully it'll never strip those out again. And that paper left just enough gap in there I can just see a hint of light through these two gears if I rotate it right. I'm going to take care of this hole, and it's just about the right size for a 1/4 inch pipe plug. I don't need to drill a pilot hole or anything. I'm just going to run a 1/4 inch NPT tap through there. Unfortunately I don't have a T-handle big enough, so this will have to do. Now if you're wondering why I tapped it from the inside of the gearbox, it's because I don't want this hole to become a pit where oil sits and debris collects. By putting the plug on this side, it should eliminate the low spot in the gearbox, and then when I change out the oil, I'll get a greater percentage of the oil out. Now, because this is going to see oil, I can't use normal Teflon tape because it might dissolve from the hydrocarbon. So I have to make sure I look for like this yellow gas line tape. The same thing that they use on natural gas, that's a hydrocarbon too. This is not going to dissolve from gas. So this is what I'm going to use. That's as tight as I can get it. Now I'm just going to carve away some of this excess tape because I don't want that to become an issue. Now I got to scrape off this old gasket, and to do that without damaging the metal seating surface, I'm going to use a plastic razor blade. To replace the gasket, I just bought generic gasketing material, marked it, and cut it with a razor blade. To make the holes, I placed the gasket on the surface, and then from the other side came through with a drill bit that was the same size. Okay, now my repaired gearbox assembly is ready to go back on the planer. I cleaned this all out. You want to make sure whenever you take apart a gearbox, you're very meticulous about taking all the dirt out. Like that one. Oops. And now the moment I've been waiting for. I've got the new bearing in, I've got the gearbox all fixed, I reassembled the chain drive just to see if that's going to work. Now I'm going to give it a test run. Returning this planer to its mechanically sound state is definitely a victory. If you enjoyed this repair video, check out the sequel where I show you every step in the restoration of this complex machine and turn it into a craftsman's pride and joy. Just like this. Isn't it beautiful, folks? See you next time.